Well, it's Thursday evening, and that means it's time to taste some wine together. Good evening, everyone. There is both a chill and some warmth in the air somehow, miraculously. They're both coexisting at the present moment when I'm looking outside, and there's the horizon that is both a beautiful sunset and ominous clouds. And so I'm hopeful that we have the occasion to spend the full term with each other this evening before we potentially lose power. I guess there's a big storm coming through, so I hope everyone's safe and has their wine ready to go. But warmth and chill relates to the warmth that I'm getting from all of you, and a number of you who are already here, Isabel and Tanya and Erica and the McCartys. So great to have you with us. Karina's with Erica too. And then the chill, of course, that goes along with the wine that we're going to be tasting tonight, which looks very refreshing right off the bat. Beautiful. Who else is with us tonight? Hi, Kathy. Expressive. Krista, hi there. All the way from rainy Vienna. And Kristen's here. Great to see you too. Thank you for joining us, Karina. And Sean, how you doing? Annie's running late. No problem. We can take a moment or two as we work our way through the aromas in the glass and the tastes in the bottle. She can catch up for sure. Hi, Rob and Kathy. Great to have you too. Excited you're with us, Alexander. Alex, man, how are you, sir? It's great to have you each week, kind of popping in. Hope you're finding value in this, even though you don't necessarily have the wine. And yeah, I agree, Kathy. Cold. It was just poured for me. It's pretty chilled, but it is very expressive. Bobby's joining us. For those of you who don't know Bobby is a part of our team. He's doing some marketing with us. You'll see him during the day hosting and helping out with lunch and running the market that we have outside. He's just a great individual, a big proponent for what's happening in Marshall. So if you haven't got a chance to meet Bobby here, you may have had a chance to meet him when he was a little bit earlier on at Gentle Harvest. And he's been a fixture here in town for a while, and he's a great addition to our team. So Bobby's with us tonight, which is awesome. Kathy, how are you? Miss Fontana, you've been enjoying we've been enjoying food and wine together for years, going back to the Ashby, which is cool. So yes, it's pretty expressive, and it's fairly identifiable, if my nose is correct. So what are you smelling, folks? So lush, Tanya's saying on the nose. Lovely there as well. Yeah, what are you smelling? Right off the bat, before we go into the appearance, because it's pretty expressive, almost undeniable. Andrew's playing along with Kelly. That's great. There was a bit of relationship strife the last time they played together in terms of a divergence of opinion on the wine, which is really kind of neat. And then, of course, wine resolves and all issues that occur as a result. So that worked out just fine, I'm sure. Pineapple is jumping out to Karina. Grass, 100%. Lime, some peach, some lime, and some hint of chalk from Carrie and Kathy, respectively. Yes, I agree. Grass. So there's that herbal grass kind of green note that's prominent. It's not necessarily the most prominent thing because there is fruit and there's definitely some kind of tropical elements. And I think to note that clearly, or to put a fine note on that, John Walter's saying that it's like Hawaii. It's like the smell of Hawaii, which is awesome. It's a great way to reference it. Hi, Craig. Yo to you too. Peach aromas, but the grassy element to me is one of those types of aromas that's a tell. Like, for example, if we say lemon citrus, it doesn't necessarily give you an exact tell for a varietal, but when you say something like grass, you're keying in on specific varietals, and that's a neat part about blind tasting. When you get a tell like that, you're onto a particular track, which can be good or bad if it's faint and it wasn't really grass that you're picking up, but then you'd go down that path and you get locked into it, you could be in trouble. But a lot of different citrus, Erica's saying, and at different points throughout the aroma. So we'll come back to the aroma. It's just that it was really prominent. Mark Luna's joining us. Hey, Mark, how are you? Mark's a great a great representative of wine and a distributor for us, but also a writer about wine and a teacher about wine. And so we're honored to have him with us this evening. Yeah, Erica, I think that's the thought. Once you talk about grass, you're talking about Sauvignon Blanc for sure. So we would have to consider that varietal first and foremost, no doubt about it. But you're not picking up grass, Karina says. So okay, that's fine. So maybe it's not something that's so prominent, but I definitely got some right off the bat. And it's both like a fresh blade of grass, and it's also a little bit in the background, sort of the smell of wet grass that would be sort of on the lawnmower the next time you went to kind of mow. It's just sort of hanging out there. There's some grass that's the aroma of grass that's there. My mom is with us. Hello. And that's Kathy's initial thought too, is Sauvignon Blanc. So we don't need to rush to judgment, but like that's the point. As we've been tasting now for multiple weeks, 20-something weeks together, if something does key in right off the bat, you want to make a note of it. You want to be at least interested in pursuing that line of thought and look to confirm it on the nose, look to confirm it on the palate, and go from there. It isn't necessarily that you want to say, like, I know what it is based on the nose and I'm done. You want to still work the process, and we will do that then. So Erica's saying the same thing. The grass, the citrus, the minerality, all of those notes denote a Sauvignon Blanc-like varietal. And so let's go through this. What else do you see by way of color? So we back up a little bit. Is it clear? Is it hazy? Is it pale? Is it medium? Is it deep? Because even if we're talking about just Sauvignon Blanc, we have to then kind of narrow down where we're going to be picking this particular Sauvignon Blanc from. And these other elements might tell us that. So it's pretty pale on my side. Yep, for you? Yeah, it's pale. It's pale, I would say, and it's a little bit lemony. There's maybe a little tiny flecks of gold that are in it. It's clean for me. I mean, as we have already kind of jumped into the aroma, because the aroma is pretty pronounced, it is a fairly clean nose as well to go with that pale and lemony kind of profile. Yeah, I got this wee sparkle of gold too. I didn't get any green flecks, which you might get from Sauvignon Blanc from time to time. And so that's not here, which might be an indication that this is perhaps a Sauvignon Blanc from a warmer climate, if it is indeed Sauvignon Blanc. And that's interesting, right? So we're getting a little bit of the green notes. The grassy note, the green bell peppery note, the jalapeno note, the green note is part of a compound called pyrazine, and the pyrazine element can be found in the Cabernet Sauvignon family, the Sauvignon Blanc family, that you get some of those pyrazine notes. For example, you don't get that note on Nebbiolo. And so that's another way to say, like, when you get a grassy note or a green note like that, a vegetal note in particular, you couldn't say then that it was Nebbiolo. They don't have those pyrazines. And so in this case, we're kind of heading toward that. Rick's saying maybe warmer vintage. Yeah, it could be absolutely, Rick. It could be less about the climate, could be a warmer vintage. In either case, we're talking about potentially, if it's not real prominent green flecks and it's not going to give us sort of a lot of that green tint, it might be a warmer vintage, or it might be a warmer climate, or both that is expressing that. Again, we don't know that for sure, and we're going to work our way toward that, but we're getting clues already. Kathy's also echoing that by saying that there's the kind of the warmer, more prominent fruit aromas are not prototypical of a very cold climate Sauvignon Blanc, and so therefore you might say this is definitely going to be more on the warmer climate spectrum. John Walter's comment about Hawaii, smelling like Hawaii, like that's tropical, and the tropical element here can happen in Sauvignon Blanc, and it does typically in a little bit more of a warmer space. So, all right, what else do you smell? Because we got a little minerality, we got some tropical fruit, lime, we got a little bit of grass quality for some, not everybody. Anything else that is there? We got fruit in the form of citrus, we got a little bit of earth and the sort of minerality element. Any wood notes? Do you smell any spice? Do you get any vanillin? Do you get any cedar? Anything of that sort? I'm not getting anything particularly woody, and that's another indication perhaps that this could be Sauvignon Blanc or a varietal that sees more stainless steel or very neutral oak. Slightest hint of almond, Isabel's noting, and Christine is finally joining us. Hi, Christine. Kathy's noting again, the grass, lime, peach. Wee hint of smoke, but no wood. I don't think there's wood here. Yeah, and I agree. Swanbergs are also noting no wood. A little bit of boxwood, and that's a great way to describe this aroma, and an aroma that you find in Sauvignon Blanc, especially in Sauvignon Blanc that comes from, say, New Zealand. Boxwood is also kind of referred to sometimes as cat pee. And so a really delightful, pleasant aroma to be found in wine, and a further testament to the grand value of wine, and that we would say or describe a wine as having the aroma of cat pee and yet having another glass. And so that's the case that I'm getting a little bit of that too. Andrew's noting a little bit of subtle beeswax, kind of a warm allspice. Yeah, I think there's a little waxiness there. Tanya's throwing that out there too. A creamy note, a waxy note, that's pleasant. White flowers was noted before, and I'm sorry I missed who made that comment, and then Jan's kind of echoing that with her flowery comment. Yeah, it was expressive out of the glass, and it's still kind of gaining more expression as we sit with it for a moment. And Robert, I understand, the smell of boxwood is pretty pronounced. Luckily in this case, though, there's a little bit of that, but it's kind of, it's bolstered, or even in this case more perhaps, as I'm smelling it, and as this is gaining in its aroma, covered by more of that tropical quality. Yeah, Andrew, that's a really good comment. Andrew's comment is noting that if a nose can feel flabby, this is it. And so this nose has, kind of a soft covering, a pillowy sort of, the visual I have in my mind is more of a duvet comforter kind of just covering the whole of the core of that minerality and some of that grassiness. It's not necessarily like just power consistent. It has this sort of fluff of aroma around it in the form of some of that fruit quality. Well, let's taste it. Ooh. Wow. What do you think? What's your initial impression right off the bat? And then we'll talk about taste. But this is interesting, huh? This plays on a multitude of levels. Sean, we should have a button that you can press so you don't have to type it every time. This is not an IPA. What if we put an IPA in there, just threw that in there one week? That would be great. I would not be able to do, or to at least lead a discussion on blind tasting for beer. That's not my strength in any way. I just drink beer. It's delicious. Which, very exciting news, this week I got a chance to visit the guys at Pen Druid, and they're now distributing, and we will be serving some Pen Druid beers in the weeks to come, probably this weekend perhaps even, which is really neat. So fantastic beers. If you don't know them, definitely something to look forward to. You can sample them here, and you certainly can go out and sample them at their spot in Sperryville, but they make outstanding beer. A little sizzly on the front of the tongue, Kristen's noting. That's kind of neat, sizzly. Yeah, like it's kind of effervescent, like Pop Rocks kind of action going on in there. Part mallow is something that's worthy of talking about. That creaminess that we were kind of picking up on the nose does seem to be reflected a little bit on the palate. When Andrew's referencing mallow, he's talking about malolactic fermentation, the transformation of that malic acid, think of a green apple's tartness, to a lactic acid. And that lactic acid has more of a creaminess. Think about milk. Milk has acidity, but it's not something that's so pronounced that we think about it being super acidic. So it's a roundness to the acid. The acid on the malic side is sharp and pointy. The malic acid is transformed to the lactic, and the lactic is kind of soft and round. Less fruit in the palate than on the nose is what Rick's noting. And Jan's noting like Sauvignon Blanc. Kathy's agreeing with Rick. There's the interplay. I'm going to touch on 2 points there. Yeah, there's the interplay of that acid and that mid palate. So if you break this up into 3 departments of taste on your palate, that first part is more about that malic, right? There's a lot of bright acid. That second part, the second third, the middle third, is a little bit rounder and creamier. And the final lingering third is a little bit back to the brightness. And so that's where Andrew was saying partial malolactic, so part of the wine might have gone through that and part didn't. And so you get the tension, the interplay of both of those kind of acidities in this wine. And I think that's a good call because there is that round creaminess, sort of really, if I'm gonna get pretty specific, in that second third, the middle third at the end of it, there's a roundness that comes in. It's really interesting. That makes this wine, as Rick pointed out, a little less about the fruit on the palate and more about the texture. There's kind of this wonderful roller coaster on the palate of this variety of acidities. So Rick's also noting that there's a little bit of pyrazine and acid. And Tanya's saying her front teeth feel dry. There's a powerful acid up front. So, This is dry, right? Front teeth feel dry. It's dry on the finish, tons of acidity. So it's got a high, medium plus to high acidity. I would go to a high. I'm salivating right now. If I stop talking, just let my mouth open, I would start to drool, which I promise I won't do for you. Yeah, and Eric, you're saying it's got a little bit more than you expect with Sauvignon Blanc. You don't expect the roundness and the creaminess. And we've served a Sauvignon Blanc that's here from Loire Valley, for example, from the Roblin brothers. That is their top tier. It comes from a special site that's on a higher elevation. And it has this core power that is pretty amazing. If you've ever had, say, Didier Dagenau's Sauvignon Blanc preparations that come from Puy-Fumé, those are textured and round and powerful. So yeah, this is different on the palate versus what it is on the nose. And it's gaining a little softness the longer it's open, as Rick's noting, but it's still persistent. That acid is still very persistent. But let's talk about, so it's dry and it's high acid. Texturally, this is more of a medium weight wine. This is not a light bodied wine, which should make us perhaps consider other varietals too, because most of the time Sauvignon Blanc, especially a Sauvignon Blanc that doesn't display necessarily an oak profile, would be more in a light bodied wine, right? And so this could be a Sauvignon Blanc still for sure that is referenced by our earlier comments as a riper version, and thus that riper version is giving us a little bit higher alcohol, which would give us a little bit more texture. And then Andrew's throwing out another element too that would be interesting too, which would also give an answer or at least an explanation for more texture, would be that it has an essence of Sauvignon Blanc and then it's been blunted or rounded perhaps by some Semillon. So Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blend that you might find from Bordeaux typically, or first and foremost, and then could go certainly further afield to, say, an Australian blend of Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah, Craig, exactly, Semillon. There's grapefruits coming through, which is another telltale sign of Sauvignon Blanc. And I think so too. I think the riper version is an example, or as something that we absolutely should consider. A place like Entre-deux-Mers could give you that Semillon Sauvignon Blanc, but more like 80% Sauvignon Blanc and 20% Semillon, or 90-10. The grapefruit's coming out for more folks, Isabel included, as this warms up a little bit. And Carrie, yeah, there's she's saying, what about a Vermentino? And that's a great call too, right? So Vermentino could give us more of this texture, has a little bit higher alcohol. There was that faint nuttiness that was for some on the palate, and that could be this. I think we could be looking at Vermentino. I don't know that we'd have as much of the telltale signs of Sauvignon Blanc and Vermentino, the grassiness in particular, and that kind of pyrazine element. But yeah, I think there's a chance we should at least consider that. What else should we consider? What other white varietals would we consider? We've got Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, maybe Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon really together, not necessarily Semillon on its own, and Vermentino. I'm not glossing over the comments about this being New World. I think that's appropriate to certainly consider, and that would account for likely the quality of richness that we're getting. Although it has it has a depth, right? I mean, it has an intrigue to it that we would typically say is more indicative of the old world than the new world, but that's not necessarily the case in every spot. And someone also made a comment that there's a little bit of Semillon in a Sauvignon Blanc that Linden's making. So yeah, we should be considering New World Sauvignon Blanc for sure, and it might be from right here in my backyard, depending on where you're watching. It's not your backyard. Kathy's noting that it tastes familiar. And that's the neat thing about this tasting group, is that we have had on a couple of occasions, right, this sort of idea that I think there's a taste that is familiar, or in the opposite end of the spectrum, it doesn't taste like Virginia, and therefore it probably isn't. And we have this sense of what Virginia tastes like. And so Matthew's noting that we need Sarah Walsh at this point. Yep. And Kathy's kind of working through her mental Rolodex of the Sauvignon Blancs that she's tasted from Virginia. This is I poured myself a healthy pour to start with, and I'm pouring another one. And I'm spitting. It's not that I'm drinking necessarily, but the acidity just makes me want to continue to keep drinking it. Karina's noting that she thinks this is French Sauvignon Blanc, Loire Valley. So from the Loire Valley, you would potentially either have a warm vintage and say something like Sancerre. You could also just have a lovely like Sauvignon Blanc from Touraine, which is maybe where I would go with this as opposed to Sancerre. The minerality is not as pronounced in this. And therefore, I think there's a chance that the Touraine would just give you a little bit more amplitude and kind of roundness. I don't get, so we're drilling down for some here in terms of Virginia, noting that it's familiar and that it's probably not, in Kathy's case, Linden or Glen Manor. And that's the case. I mean, Linden's sort of a Viognier Sauvignon Blanc now comes in these, their wines right now. I mean, the last time I've tried their Sauvignon Blanc, it had a much greater richness to it. And that was not really evident here. It's the Bordeaux quality that Andrew's getting, I can see that with Little Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. I also find it somewhat familiar. So something like, kind of like, I've tried a number, of course, of Sauvignon Blancs that would have come, say, from Bro and Walsh and Delaplane, kind of up this way, that have that ripeness, that give you that extra degree of alcohol without it being overpowering, but it gives you that textural quality, and the aromas are there that would match. So Touraine is in the running. We could be talking about sort of interesting Bordeaux with Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. We could be talking about Australia and the way of a Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blend. Yeah, I don't know. Is it fair to put you on the spot, Rick, and say we might be blind tasting your own wine? That would be horrible. I wouldn't do that to you. But, you know, like, let's take that for example. Like, what if it's Delaplane 2017? Ripe vintage, warm wine, gonna give you some of that tropical character, gonna give you the character, the varietal character, and then maybe there was some mallow that kind of went through on this partially. And they're using, Rick, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you're still using like neutral barrels, right? So you're gonna get a little texture from that on that production, and that could be a way to say that what this wine is. That would be awfully interesting if if Tony and Julie conspired with Rick to put a Sauvignon Blanc in here. Rebecca, how are you? Good evening. Yeah, Tanya, for Napa, possibly for $30 I would have a hard time with that. And the Napa productions usually get a little bit more wood, and the tropical though you would pick up on. And so I did think about that initially. I don't usually get this profile from that. The high acid is just wonderful, and so the acid and ripeness is something that I oftentimes kind of look at Virginia for, where you can get some ripeness and not opulent ripeness, not crazy sugary sweet ripeness, but you get the ripeness elements and then you still maintain a bunch of freshness and acidity. So Swanbergs are noting the Delaplane Mélange, which yeah, I guess you could, I mean, if it was dominated by Sauvignon Blanc, I don't recall, I haven't had more recent variations on Mélange. We just picked up some of the Mélange with, it's Petit Manseng though, and it's Chardonnay based, right? But it's not, and Viognier, I think, right? It doesn't have Sauvignon Blanc in it. So this is more varietally correct Sauvignon Blanc as far as I can tell. Verdejo is also thrown out, and Verdejo would be an interesting option too. Susan's thrown out 2018 Virginia, and Rick's saying 2019, year for acidity and ripeness. Yeah, so 2019 would be a great year, and that's probably more akin to where we are in the marketplace than the 17. Rick's not going to tip his hand if he knows this, I hope. Maybe he's just in here kind of as a ringer, like the Walshes were hanging around sometimes. And yeah, so a little bit of Vidal. Sorry, thanks Rick for the clarification. Yep, some Vidal oftentimes goes in the Mélange. That's a wonderful wine. And Eric is noting that she doesn't seem to be 18. I mean, 18 would give you that acid and that brightness, but not necessarily, I think, that ripeness. If we were talking about vintage, and let's do that. Like, so sometimes as you get to know a place and you talk about the vintage variations, one thing that I kind of just look for in a way to just remember it is that if it was generally warm, you're talking about riper profiles. And therefore you get just kind of a general understanding that if you're going to pick between three vintages, 17, 18, and 19 in Virginia, and the wine's displaying kind of a lean quality and it's not particularly fruited and it's not ripe, 18 was that leaner year, rainier year, so you go with 18. If it's round and rich and it has a profound quality to it and it seems a little bit aged and advanced, you'd pick 17. If it has a real freshness and a youth about it, you'd pick 19. So that's kind of how you use vintage, generally speaking, unless you can really dial in on a particular wine and a producer and those vintages because you've tried them over and over again. Andrew's playing the game in a different way by looking at the bottle itself and noting that it has a screw cap. And there's very few screw caps in Virginia, so this would have to be a screw-capped Virginia production. And some do put their wines in screw cap. I don't know whether or not the Sauvignon Blanc from Delaplane, for example, is in screw cap. I think Bro uses screw caps, so that could be a case. Terrera uses that. Okay, so we're kind of heading down the path of Virginia Viognier. Sorry, Virginia Sauvignon Blanc, excuse me. I was talking about Viognier, or thinking about Viognier in the context of the Mélange, but I don't think it's that. So, Cana definitely uses screw cap, yep, which Eric is noting. So it could be Cana. Yeah, you know, there's a familiar element too, and there's kind of that boxwood and the greenness, but there's also like a musky melon element that I've tasted before on Virginia Viognier or Virginia Sauvignon Blanc. God, I'm on the Viognier kick. And Candy's noting that it doesn't really taste as much Sauvignon Blanc on the finish. Yeah, it doesn't linger with that grassy note. And a lot of those flavor notes that we're picking up on the palate in the form of aroma are not translating to flavor on the body and on the body of the wine and the palate. It's giving us texture. Alfie is joining us. Hey man, how are you? I used to work with Alfie way back at Goodstone. Great to have you joining us, sir. Okay, so we have some that have already staked their claim that it's a 2019 Virginia Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah, I'm gonna go. It's got a little bit more of a complexity to it, like a depth to it that I could give it a moment longer than 19. So I'm gonna say 17. 2017. I'll throw Delaplane out there. I don't know if I can be that specific because I don't know that wine that well, but for sure 17. Virginia Sauvignon Blanc is going to be my guess, I think. And yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Kristen's putting 19 there. Should I go back to 19? Maybe I should. That acidity is really, really poppy, and I wonder if that would just kind of dissipate a little bit, being a touch older. I could make an argument either way. Tanya's saying she's feeling solid about it being youngish, New World, Sauvignon Blanc, less about which country. So we could, yeah, I think, I'm just pausing and thinking about that. Kathy's going to go with Adele playing 19, especially because Rick noted that 19 has a certain characteristic that might be found in this particular wine. Rick's saying 17, not enough acidity. So 19. Okay, well, Rick's telling us what to do, and it's potentially Rick's wine, so we probably should go with 19 then. Yeah, we're just doing one more taste to kind of think again through Verdejo, Vermentino, Semillon. That little bit of waxiness we got on the nose kind of would be indicative of perhaps some Semillon. But it just doesn't taste to me like Bordeaux. It tastes more like Virginia. So I'm going to go with that gut, and it seems like a few of you are with that same train of thought. Rick, you're going to recuse yourself. That's probably good. If you're recusing yourself, that's probably even more of an indication that this is we're on the right path. And how interesting, I'm not even opening yet, but that says we're on the very right path. So how cool is that? We are drinking a Sauvignon Blanc from Delaplane Cellars from 2019. That is really cool. Rick, well done, sir. This is really neat, right? It's got complexity, so it's got old world characteristic. It's got bright, vibrant acidity. It's got some cool tropical notes. It's got certainly the citrus you're looking for. So a lot of the places that we were thinking about and a lot of ways you look for Sauvignon Blanc, it has a lot of those components in here blended together as opposed to just having one profile. I mean, Sauvignon Blanc is typically very, very simple. And it has the grassiness and the lime and the grapefruit, and you're done. This has that, and it has tropical, and it has texture, and it has a richness. Rick, do you, while we've got you, does it see a little bit of malolactic, and does it go into neutral barrel? We'll wait for Rick to see if he can respond to that, but it doesn't give me any indication on the back. It's got 13.7% alcohol, so it has a little bit more richness. It's not certainly high alcohol by any means, but it's not in the 12.5 range, and that extra perhaps degree of alcohol gives you a little bit more of that body, which we're tasting in the middle. It's all done in stainless. Perfect. Okay, so it just has a little bit of that richness by way of perhaps that degree of alcohol and just the caliber of the aggressive malolactic stop. Cool, so yeah, it does no malolactic fermentation and stainless steel. It's just the ripeness of 19 and some really great fruit coming in and making a really great wine. So cheers to you, Rick. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to work with this. That's neat. For the rest of you, see, we have really good wine, especially those of you that are tasting in Virginia. We have really great wine in our backyard. And it's a wine that makes you think about wines from around the world. And it's a great bolster for the method we're using for tasting wine. So if you evaluate wine blind, you find out whether you enjoy it before you let any biases come in. Not that anyone should have a bias against Virginia or any other place for that matter. You're just looking for quality wine and the great producers in it. And Rick, you're in that camp in this space. So cheers to you and for everybody else for joining us. Thank you so much for tasting and playing along this week. I will see you next week, as I believe we have Tony joining us next week. So we'll do another wine where I know the wine, but he doesn't, and we'll walk our way through that together. Until that time, cheers everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.